Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about instrument connection types. So, instrument connection types. Firstly, most of the time we're going to connect it to an audio interface. So hopefully you have already got an audio interface and you check that out in the Setting Up a Home Music Studio course. If you haven't, then please go back to that and check it out, or do a bit of research on audio interfaces, because you're going to want one to plug in your instruments or your microphones and various components. But again, this all depends on what you are actually recording. So let's talk about the interface types, and that might dictate on what you actually are going to need going forward. So generally there are 4 different types of connections that you can use to get your instrument into your recording software. 2 of them are via an audio interface, and 2 of them possibly are via directly through your computer and not via your audio interface. So one of the simplest ones that is connected directly to your computer and not via an audio interface is a USB connector. And a USB connector is going to cover off instruments, various things like keyboards, potentially MIDI controllers. It could be a USB microphone, those sort of instruments there. Okay, they're not going to be all of your mainstream instruments, but USB is obviously a lot more common these days, especially in the digital world that we live in, and that could be one approach. Now obviously if that's what you are using, then you don't need an audio interface as such, other than for playing your music out. So most likely you've still got an audio interface, or hopefully you have, but it's not always a necessity if you are using just USB based instruments. Now USB instruments is quite simple. Plugging it in, you plug it into your computer. It may require some software, a lot of it does. Obviously you can download all of that off the website as part of your instrument. Go to the manufacturer's site, download the software, install it to get your instrument working. So one of the other types is a direct in or high impedance, and these will be plugged into your audio interface. They are generally a TS style plug. It's a 1/4 inch. Think of your guitar cable, that sort of connector. Now these can be generally used, as I said, they can be for guitar, especially if you're going to use some virtual amplifier software or something like that within your recording software, and you just want the raw, clean guitar sound in. The other one that's quite commonly used is for bass guitar, because bass guitar can quite often sound really good just straight in as it is, without having an amplifier or speakers or microphone. And it's definitely a technique that's used for doubling bass. You'll go direct in. So some audio interfaces will have dedicated high impedance connectors or direct ins. Now when I say direct in or high impedance, they are slightly different. High impedance is more for your guitars and your bass, which is their very low output signals, so they need this high impedance to make the sound come through properly. Direct in could be high impedance, it depends what they name it, but it could also just be a line in where you can just plug in an external audio sound, not a microphone, but just an external sound, which could be anything. It could be an MP3 player, it could be anything at all, and that can be classified as a direct in as well, which is not necessarily, or line level, not necessarily high impedance. Now you might also find that on some audio interfaces that the connector itself might be multi-purpose, so it might be a direct in, high impedance and an XLR all combined into one connector, and the audio interface itself detects what you have plugged in by the actual connector itself, by the plug that goes into it. So speaking of XLRs, that is one of the other most common interfaces that is going to be on an audio interface again. Now these are a round 3-pin style thing, connector. They are mostly, if not all, for microphones, and they basically create a very low noise level connection type. They're perfect for the microphones, and they also have the ability to provide the 48-volt phantom power over there to power certain microphones that require that. So this is a very common plug. And again, as I said, it could be a multi-purpose plug where it's also could be a DI or it could be an XLR. So the last one we're going to talk about is MIDI. Now this one here can be two different approaches. Okay, this could be a connector that is on your audio interface, and it's so especially old style MIDI devices will have these MIDI DIN connectors. They've got quite a few pins in them. They look sort of like an XLR, but not quite. So these are generally found on some of your old devices, but you know, they still are used on many devices today. Things like synths, especially, you know, old vintage style synths and things like that, that need to have that MIDI input in there. The other MIDI style can go direct to your computer. And again, this is actually a USB connector. So you might think that it's just the same as USB, but while it technically may seem that way, it's actually not. It's passing MIDI data as such, and not just a USB connector. Like, it's not like a USB microphone or something like that where it's just digital signal going over the port. This one actually is sending MIDI data. And the point of MIDI is that there's no actual sound across it. It is pure digital, and it's just sending code to tell software what to do. So you are reliant on software in the computer actually making the sounds for you. So when you press a key on one of these keyboards or something like that, it just sends a digital message into the computer, and the computer then responds to that by playing a sound to suit that message. Okay, so that's a brief of the instrument connection types. Hopefully that has helped that and cleared that up for you. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments so that we can discuss what your needs are, what you have, what you don't have, how things work, etc. If there's not enough content in here, or you just need a bit more clarification and something's not 100% sure, please ask comments below in the comments or in the Facebook group. In the PDF, there is a worksheet for this chapter. If you haven't downloaded it already, go and grab it from the start of the course and fill out the worksheet. Again, some of these things might seem a little bit trivial, but to me, they're preparing you for the end game of starting to record. It's getting you to understand your setup, know what you have, what you need to have, and all of that sort of stuff. So check out the worksheet there. Fill it all out with what your instruments are, what your connection types are, so that you know what you have and what you need to plug in and where you need to plug it into and how it's actually going to function, because this is going to determine how you actually set your recording software up in the future videos and things like that to start to get your recordings going. So hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.